What's going on, world? Welcome to the official Razor Edge Games podcast, where we supply you with the latest news and updates regarding our highly anticipated title, Eden Falling. I am Bryson Weiser, alongside my colleague Taylor Rodriguez. We are on the marketing team here at Razor Edge Games, and today we've gathered some of our amazing colleagues and department leads to discuss the highs and possibilities, some lows of Eden's recent conversion to Unity's high definition render pipeline, HDRP. Now, if you've never heard of HDRP, don't worry, I didn't either until recently, hence why I'm in marketing and not game development. But we will break that down and we'll hear from our technical leads, artists, designers, engineers, and more, each sharing their unique perspective on how HDRP has influenced their work and taken Eden Falling to new heights. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I'm here with animation team lead Justin Young. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you very much. So, with the HDRP conversion not directly impacting your team, what milestones have you achieved during this period?
Yeah, so we didn't need to work on the HDRP conversion directly, but we were definitely still impacted by it. So, with our team going through every asset during their conversion process, we ended up receiving kind of a couple different categories of updated models. So, some meshes were updated, so we had to go in and update our rigs so that they were up to date and compatible with the changes. Some assets only had texture changes, so we didn't have to do too much to make sure they were up to date. And of course, there were a bunch of new assets that we had to work on. So after we received all the assets from our team, we would have to set them up, rig them up, and do any of the animations on them, and then we'd have to import them, implement them in Unity. So that's kind of the bulk of what we had to do as a result of the HDRP conversion.
Okay, sounds like a lot of work. Has the extra time before entering early access allowed you to complete more animations or find existing ones?
Yeah, so we definitely spent a lot of time creating animations for several weapons and creatures. Kind of used that extra time very well. We also updated other character animations throughout the scene, so we got a lot of characters and amenities looking nice and good. Uh, this in addition to working through the updated assets um, that art team has sent us.
Okay, sounds like you were able to get quite a bit done then. Were you able to revise previous animations to enhance their fluidity?
Yeah, so we've definitely gone through scene by scene, kind of looked through any animations. If they looked off, we went back and we updated them. It's always a continuous process to kind of refine and make sure the character animations look very lifelike. So we're definitely always on the lookout for any suspect animations that we got to fix.
Okay, and aside from the HDRP update, have there been any other challenges for the animation team?
Yeah, so it's sometimes a tricky task to get our animations to look as we intend them to. So within Unity, we have to kind of set them up and work closely with the coding team to make sure that our animations play nicely with the code. So one of the systems we had to design and implement with the help of the coding team is the prop system. So with the large variety of props that our characters need to interact with, we have to make sure we create a system that could handle the characters touching, moving, and holding different objects, all with similar animations without having to sort of kind of create a unique new animation for each object.
Okay, well, this has been very informative. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Art. Taylor, would you like to introduce them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to introduce Nathan Clark, our team lead within the art department, as well as William Kelshaw, the assistant team lead. How you guys doing?
Doing all right.
Doing good.
Camera took a little bit of it.
Awesome. So whoever wants to take the first question, moving all the textures from URP to HDRP sounds like a huge undertaking. Can you just walk us through that process? Like, what does that process look like specifically for y'all?
Yeah, when we first started this, it was initially thought that we could just move all the textures over and be good, and then we were looking through the shaders and everything to get everything set up, and we realized that not everything works the same. So we had to go through and figure out how to break down what textures we did have and try to use third-party programs like Blender to actually just use their own like custom shader graphs to just merge everything together. And we realized while doing that there was a lot of stuff that was just old or just not polished to the degree that we needed it to be. So a lot of the stuff happens to go through and getting a lot more of our general materials finalized and then pushing those out to our teams to go, hey, we're going to use these from now on. And that is giving us a more cleaner look and more of a style that we're trying to go for instead of a more ultra realism that we were trying beforehand and not doing too well in HDRP. It's been a rather taxing setup to make sure we have everything done, and then also realizing how much we had left to actually do was another kind of a eye opener moment for us.
Yeah, but learning the shader graphs and adapting shaders for the various materials must have been very complex. Like, how did your team manage that, and like how time consuming was it, honestly?
A lot of the shader work has been handled by us too with the leads, and we just have handed it down to the team and it told them what the process and procedure will be. Trying to learn the shaders is a lot more complicated than we had expected. Um, and I'm still getting floored whenever I start taking apart old shaders that are available online and learning from them, being like, what does this do? What does this mean? I'm lost. How do I fix this? So it's quite a bit to learn about, but I mean, once you start getting into it and you get your hands dirty, you can kind of find your way through and find documentation. So you look up the nodes and figure out what each one does. You learn how to use the pieces instead of trying to solve the puzzle in one go. Um, and yeah, we essentially just pass it on down to people and tell them what we need of them for the shaders that are made.
Awesome. Well, all right. So, has support from Unity been sufficient in this transition, especially regarding the shader reproduction? And also, just because I know people are asking, could you touch on the issue of the clothing poke through mentioned by the various playtesters?
We have reached out to Unity for a couple of things, but we really haven't needed to because there's a lot of material available online on their forums, which is a good way to actually look through and find solutions to problems you have, because a lot of people have the same problems. So I've been doing a lot of that, it's just trying to find stuff that's there, reading a lot through the documentation, stuff on YouTube to find tutorials. I even looked up some actual groups that actually do professional training to look through how they do things. And we've taken that and moved and handed it down to our team and taught them or gave them the same materials that now that we found it so they can learn from. Stuff like the poke through for clothing, that had to do with how our team was originally. Our team was fragmented into like 4 or 5 different teams, and there was lack of communication between the teams and stuff like that, which led to disparity between how things were done. Well, for the clothing, the problem is the clothing was not made from the body; it was wrapped around the body. So because of that, you had stuff not lining up. There were points and lines and curves that were not in the same place. So now we have fixed that because with this big rework that we did, we completely remade all of the clothing. We were trying to cut down the number of assets that we need to have, making texture variants, but from that, getting a lot more out of it by providing options for layered materials and stuff like that for all the color variations and stuff. in. It's something we're still heavily working on. It's still a lot more that we want to add. And but from that, because we use the body that we're putting into the game as the final body, everything should line up a lot nicer, and stuff like the poke throughs would get fixed. That's how we've been tackling a lot of the problems that have come our way from critiques from QA and stuff. Is we've been essentially looking at it, and if it's early enough in the pipeline, we re- reestablish what the correct order of completion should be for us to fix the problem from its root rather than putting a band-aid on it.
Right. Well, thank you for explaining that, because I know, like, somebody like me, I would never have thought it was that complex. But just because I want to ask William, like, has there been any other challenges specifically with the HDRP conversion?
Yeah. Nathan put up a little, mentioned a little bit. Before we started doing the conversions, our team was split up into sections, and so there was a good chunk of time right before we started doing the HDRP where our team thought we were basically done with models. We got everything that we thought we had done, and everything else was pushed to the drives. But when we started doing the conversions and everything, I mentioned it before that we had a lot of stuff that was just not done. And getting through and getting all that set up, and then we started off before the HDRP conversion to have this like kind of this damaged, destroyed kind of texture variance to them that you kind of have this bleed through, and we realized that HDRP won't do that quite easily when it comes to getting all the shaders set up. So we had to essentially at the start of it cut out the dirty and damaged variants, and we're getting everything prepped and cleaned up, and then we're going to go through and we got all these decals and all these sprays that we can put on things to show off the more grungy look of everything. So we don't have to worry about too much of the we're gonna make this look dirty and it's gonna have to be only dirty. We can have a clean version of it and then just use the decal systems and all of the grunge we've accumulated through just making sprays and just throw those on the weapons, throw those on materials, on backdrops and everything, and get that nice grungy look back that we were trying to get before HDRP. Um, One of the things was we had and Nathan put up with the shaders. There was a lot of stuff that we were using to help work on that meshed well for Unreal, but we're trying to back engineer it for Unity. And then other things that came about was the fact that not everything's one to one with those two programs. And that was a big learning curve for a lot of us when we're trying to get this shader to look correctly, and we're going, I can't find that node anywhere on Unity. That was a fun thing to try to figure out how to recreate that node without actually having that node.
Right, right. Well, thank you so much for your clarity, gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Thank
All right,
you.
you have a good day.
I would like to introduce coding and their assistant team lead, John Owen. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Bryson. Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you very much.
Good.
While the HDRP conversion might not have had a direct impact, did any systems need adjustments to be compatible with HDRP?
No, not really. The code was pretty much unaffected by the HDRP conversion. Um, we had to make a new uh, branch on GitHub for the art teams to work their magic to make the necessary changes. Um, but nothing directly related to the conversion within the code. No.
Okay, so although nothing was directly affected, with the additional time, could you share some developments your team has had made in in-game rules?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we took this time to, there were a lot of rules that were implemented into the game already that needed updated or finished. So we took time to be getting those uh, fixed. Things like the buying and selling stuff at the shops, those sorts of things. as part of that, we also worked with concept team to do a lot of UI revisions, because that was a big piece of feedback that we got prior and from internal testing that the UI needed adjusted. So we spent a lot of time on that. We've also been getting more of the card decks implemented, especially the events recently. And there's also optional rules for the game that we've been working on when we find time for those.
Now, I heard you touch base on the UI. Post playtest feedback highlighted UI issues. Have you been able to address these, and what changes can we expect?
Yeah, as mentioned, we've been working with Concept on revising and re-implementing the UI, both in a sense where they're revising and we're also providing our own feedback from our own playtests and such. So there's been large scale changes to the UI. The inventory systems have had their readability greatly improved. The combat screen has been revised to be a bit more clear. The turn-by-turn action selection, such for that we use to take the actions in the game out of combat, that has been completely changed from the last time it was public, to use a new in-level selector system instead of the on-screen radial UI, just to name a few examples.
Although you said your team wasn't affected by the HDRP conversion, has there been any unforeseen challenges during the transition to HDRP?
Yeah, some. Uh, the process of updating to HDRP, it's long and it's involved. And so some coding systems interact with certain elements, things like interacting with character models or the clothes or other things of that nature, have been were it needed to be put on hold for some time while those changes were made by the other teams. Uh, can't put a whole lot of effort into making sure that the clothing is working correctly when the clothing still needs to be updated, that sort of thing.
Understandable. Well, thank you for your time today, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Good being on.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Awesome. So I would like to introduce the concept team lead behind Eden, Matthew Lewis. Matthew, how are you?
I'm well. Glad to be here. How are you doing, Taylor?
Good, wonderful. Glad to be here. So
That's
I know it's a pressing question. How has your team utilized the time to revise and supply the new textures and concepts in direct relation to your art team?
Oh, well, we had a lot of time to do that. What we did is we took the time, we standardized the textures, right, by establishing an extensive series of new swatches and samples, and that helped to inform the art team's new shader, what they talked about previously. And we also took the opportunity to revisit older concepts, right? We revamped them accordingly, and we started a long process of correcting what I call aesthetic drift. Now, those who might not know what aesthetic drift is, it's what happens when the original vision for what a game should look like overall. It's kind of an internal term, but it when the vision, right? You have the vision, and then you have the way everything looks. And when you have several artists, each with their own unique style and take and everything, and you have different inputs, right? It starts to the game starts to accumulate a lot of subtle differences in the look, right? And that accumulation over time creates a drift. So you kind of have to snap it back to vision, right, in order to get everything going. So you take the time, you review the older concepts, you recycle what you can, you update what you can with the better styles, the new styles, more consistency and everything. And what this did in collaboration with the art team, right? Because they had a lot of models and such that were still viable, is we went back and we made sure that our concepts were matching stuff that they did, right? So we could continue to weave our work with theirs and continue forward. So correcting aesthetic drift ultimately is what we were doing, and providing the new shaders and informing our team's next steps with the shader. So that's about what we did there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your clarity on that. So, if I may be honest, the overall involvement, your involvement in the UI, the overhaul of it sounds really critical. Is the UI now complete, or is this still an ongoing process?
It's an ongoing process. The UI will never be complete, as it were, because it's constantly evolving, based on player feedback, based on just the the back and forth of play efficiency, new ideas, and everything else. So it's never going to be complete, but it is functional, right? We have, as it were, the the spine of the UI in. It's it's now moving into the phase where we're going to get through early access a lot of the player feedback. That's going to inform how the UI changes from now on, how it evolves, how it improves, hopefully, and that's going to be the goal. So I hope that answers the question about its completeness. But there's a subtle difference between complete and playable, if that makes sense, right? We've got it playable. Now we're going to polish it. We're going to make it really beautiful. We're going to make it awesome. That's what we're going for, and that's going to continue into the future for the longevity of the game.
Got it. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Well, with this extended period, it's also allowed for revisions in the clothing and hair designs and everything previously discussed. Could you elaborate on those improvements at all?
Oh yeah. So along with getting things consistent, fixing aesthetic drift, and helping to inform the new shader, right? We were able to take the time to produce copious amounts of new hair, clothing, and accessories. And we brought on fashion artists specifically for this task, right? Uh, people who are people whose training is in fashion directly, right? So we were able to take their eye for detail and inform the creation of assets down the pipeline that not only look better on the models because the cut of everything is actually accurate to clothing the way it works in the real world, right? Because kind of on canvas, everything has a little bit of that the blur of fantasy, as it were. But the fashion artists were able to come in, were able to give us their expertise, produce feasible work, feasible in the real world, and what this has done, along with hair, clothing, and everything else, it's added a bit of what's called verisimilitude to the game, right? A little bit more reality in an otherwise still, kind of post-apocalyptic, kind of sci-fi-esque, uh, imaginative world. But that's what we've done. Just absolute copious amounts that we've given to the art team at this point. So they're going to have a lot of fun with the new stuff.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know as another question that I really have been thinking about that I wanted to ask you was, have there been any other challenges that have been encountered by your team specifically in relation to the HDRP update?
I would say the biggest challenge for concept, it's definitely been the UI. And coding can attest to this on their end as they have. Uh, in collaboration with coding, we rebuilt the UI from scratch. We rebuilt it twice, right? Because my team, I wasn't satisfied with it. Play testing wasn't satisfied with it, and uh, that's a really taxing thing to do, right? But uh, we did it, and we did it twice. And we've been adjusting the current UI, which internally we call it UI 3, and it the adjustments to that have been just as extensive as the scratch builds. So, and of course, it takes a lot of time testing, breaking it, implementing the novel ideas, testing it again, and concept-wise, scrapping experimentations when they don't work, right? You got to kind of let your babies go. So, uh, at the end of the day, the most taxing part of it is just trying to make everything as future-proof as we can as the systems are built and evolve. And other than that, the game itself has a lot going on under the hood. So capturing all the nuances of the game in a user-friendly interface that works and and is aesthetically pleasing, that kind of ticks all the boxes, it can be a Herculean task. But my team's up to it, and at the end of the day, we will conquer. We always do,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Matthew.
as always.
Next, I would like to introduce Mike Weiser, the CEO and executive producer of Razor Edge Games. He will be a fill-in for the design team leads as there was a scheduling conflict. Hello, Mike. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you very much. So the HDRP conversion, it didn't affect design directly, but how did the extra time benefit for the storytelling and game development?
Well, as you know, the design team consists of not only the writers, but game designers. And yes, they've been very busy using the extra time to basically cover some major areas. I'll detail a few of those. For instance, lore development, extensive brainstorming on entirely new regions of the game that are yet to be announced, including new Marauder games, cryptids, and history of the pre and post fall for those areas. We developed additional holidays and belief system structures that will be present in the game. We also had a chance to revise the extensive slang dictionary because a cyberpunk game can't be a cyberpunk game without an extensive list of slang. On top of that, there's been a lot of consolidation on the timeline of the pre-fall history. It allowed us a chance to collectively bring it all together so that it became a cohesive narrative. We also had the chance to create detailed Marauder gang dossiers, which is very interesting. It allowed us to flesh out the leaders of the Marauder groups and a lot of the interesting details about them that the character or the players will learn as they play the game. Additional brainstorming sessions on AI entities found in the game, the cartel, overgrowth, ferals, even psychic abilities. It allowed us, this extra time to work on that stuff. Along with that, some of the less exciting stuff, but still necessary things, supporting documentation and content. There's been numerous design Bible documents, including stuff for NPCs, groups, terrain, tech, corporalplex, settlements, which, the defensive and infrastructure expansion of the settlements and their materials, POIs, terrain, tech, the lighting and transportation and general lore and soundscapes of the game. Concept and level design briefs for early access and amenities. The team dealt a lot with the other teams, to help, make sure everybody was on the same page for the ideas coming down, so to speak, from the head of the snake at design, which filter all down through the other teams eventually. We also had a chance to, work on a lot of revised dialogue for the first scene where you meet the NPC that leads into character creation. And we got to review and finalize much of the proposed game in dialogue and narrative flavored text for the amenities, terrains, events, etc. And lastly, game mechanics. Some of the fun part there is adding additional patrol mechanics to the game, where you bump into various patrols from the factions or gangs out in the real world. We roughed out a lot of the settlement gate mechanics. This is where you enter a settlement, the process you would go through to enter a settlement in this future world. On top of that, we adjusted the game's time mechanics slightly, with player feedback during testing. We found that a slight change to the time mechanic was necessary. And lastly, in these bullet points, we developed a narrative arc management and delivery system tool. It's not yet fully finalized, but it's going to be a great tool that I think every player of the game will enjoy. And these are just a few of the main bullet points of what the team's been working on during this time period.
Well, it sure sounds like this extra time to work on stuff has been beneficial for design. Along with this downtime, has it enabled design to enrich the player's experience in Eden with more varied storylines?
Absolutely. Yes, we haven't fully finalized like the larger narrative arcs, but we spent a considerable amount of time on them. The extra time allowed us to add a substantial amount in terms of player enrichment by providing insight and context on aspects of the game world and how they interact with it, FAQs, and even the tools that players will have available to them to create contracts, the quests in our game world.
Now, I'm not good at writing lore for a game, so can you share some insights into the creative process of writing lore for Eden Falling?
Absolutely. Since Eden Fallen is a mix of real world fact, fiction, and mythology, the main challenge is trying to deliver the story that we imagine in an enjoyable way without overwhelming the players. The real key lies in the strength of the team members. Their imagination and enthusiasm leads to some incredibly productive brainstorming sessions. We often wind up with way more ideas than we can use.
Well, it sure sounds like all this downtime has been extremely beneficial for the writing process and everything else. What other challenges has the design team faced, if any, during the HDRP conversion?
Good question. Though the design team didn't directly work with the graphics, one of the major challenges the team faced was grappling with the massive amount of lore we have produced over the years, making it consistent and creating an updated game design document to go with this vision. The newer version that's been turned out now is even more massive than the previous version that we had, but it addresses a lot of those inconsistencies wherever we found them.
Well, thank you for giving us some insight on that, and thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to bring on our level design department, our team lead Paul Bernard, as well as our assistant team lead Liz Zibney. How are y'all doing today?
Doing mostly good, but of course I had to get hit with some allergies right before this, so excuse me if I mute very quick to cough my lungs out.
You're all right in my book. How are you, Liz?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I know HDRPs like the detailed shadows and lighting must have posed some sort of item placement challenges, plus obviously issues with the speed tree compatibility. How did your team tackle all this?
Well, for the most part, I would say the lighting and the shadows would be a little bit more for VFX. Largely, we placed the assets that we were given, including the actual physical, if you will, lights. VFX comes through and adds the lights to it afterwards, though there's been a little bit of back and forth. If once they get to it, there needs to be some changes, and we've been doing lots of that recently. And of course, I'm sure this workflow will get a little bit smoother once we get the first of like all of these scenes lit, and we get more familiar with each other's workflow, and we get some of the stuff more finalized for how that we actually want to handle these scenes going forward. Because lots of these are like the first of X number of this type of scenes. So like the bar scene, for example, we're going to have a bunch of other bar scenes. So of course that one, once they get their work done on it, we're going to have a better idea of how all we want to do these scenes going forward. As for the speed tree, it's been rather hard getting all of that stuff converted. The biggest thing is, I think when we got the lots of the speed tree assets, maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago. So lots of stuff has changed with speed tree, so it wasn't just as easy as like putting them back into speed tree and updating them for HDRP. There's a little bit more work that's kind of needing to get done with them. And then with some of the changes to the assets, with some of the third-party stuff that we use to help populate the scenes with vegetation, we are going to be having to go back and actually update some of that stuff. It won't just update automatically, unfortunately. But we have a couple of great people working on that right now, getting all of that stuff set up so that we will be able to have those terrain scenes ready to go going forward.
Awesome. Well, I know with the opportunity to revisit these levels, could you share specific like enhancements or changes that were made?
Yes, so we have lots of stuff that has been updated. Lots of these scenes that were in the game previously, we tried to keep those mostly the same, so it's still like the same scene, though some have had some massive reworks. There's also been a lots of plans for some future scenes, future versions of those that we will hopefully do. Might be a little while for those to actually get added in, but we have lots of really cool ideas for some future scenes and about how to do those. But for this push we're doing right now, we've been trying to update the stuff that we've had before and not just do drastic reworks on all of them because they just look entirely different just anyways, but lots of them have had lots of updates done to them, lots of new assets. Of course, while this has been happening, lots of new things have been worked on. We had new concepts, new like design lore stuff, new assets in general. So lots of them have lots of just new stuff that makes them look a whole lot better than what they did before. And then, of course, the longer we work on them, the more you go, I can make this look a little bit better. Now, I'm not happy with this. Let's go ahead and add just a little bit more here and there. And I think lots of them are going to look really good when everybody gets to see them.
Awesome. Well, I know throughout this whole podcast that we spoke specifically in depth about the UI and the changes that the whole all the teams across the company have faced. Would you be able to talk a little bit more how the UI or the new UI has affected the levels as well as like the various spawn points and different interactions?
Yes, the new in-level selector has been a really big boost to our scenes. Because kind of before, lots of the amenity scenes were almost kind of like menu scenes where you just selected an action from the list and then your character was there actually doing the action. And it was just kind of not a very involved, and then lots of the scene wasn't really seen because you'd make, like, say, a bar scene. But if you only interacted with those particular areas, you might not see any parts of the bar, and it was kind of hard to kind of judge where you would see, where you wouldn't see. Some cool places in the scene got missed. But with actually having this, letting you look around and choose where you want to go, it's made the levels actually feel more lived in and like an actual scene and not just a like glorified menu list. Uh, and then also in addition to that, just kind of increase the overall feel of the scene. And it's not something that a lots of games similar to this kind of style have. A lot of things might would just have it still sort of be a menu, but this adds just that extra, I don't know, like polish to it. Just makes it feel more proper. And then it was excellent whenever I think it was Matt and I forget who else was coding when they were meeting about it. I think they had like the rough outline for this made like that night or the next day, and it was just awesome seeing it just come together. Of course, we had like lots more polish with it, and then they worked with the UI to get it to actually look better than of course that rough version was. But it was just a game changer actually seeing that with the stuff that we want, just placing areas that NPCs just populated or you select from a list and then you teleported over there and then you were there. You were actually in the scene doing stuff, and then it made the scenes actually be able to be fully seen, and then more of our team's work got actually could actually be seen by everybody else besides just us looking in the engine because you're actually able to look around and view the entire scene.
That's awesome. Like, I can't wait to hear more about this. Has there been any other obstacles encountered within your department from the HDRP conversion?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of slowdown. It wasn't as quick as it was kind of like advertised to be initially. So there was a lots of stuff that it took us a while to get back up to where we were getting all the assets converted over, then also getting some new ones, and then like, hey, we can polish this a little bit more. But then also, the longer it took, the more coding was able to get done. So then we had more stuff to actually add into our scene. So it wasn't just getting them back up to where it used to be. We then had these other new features to add in there and to account for, which I think has also improved the scenes significantly because there's going to be a lot more interaction, at least with some of them. I think most of the amenities still have about the same amount of interactions they did before, but then like the train scenes and locations, we're going to have a lot more stuff in there because we actually got more of that stuff made at this point. So we could add more of those features into the game versus what we had previously.
Awesome. Well, Paul, Liz, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Sounds team lead Ronaldo Gonzalez. However, due to medical issues, he will not be able to turn on his camera, but he will be able to answer our questions for us. How are you
That's
doing
what you
today, Ray?
said. I'm good. Um, what can I say? I have an
So,
amazing team.
yep, hard workers. So, I'm aware that your team wasn't directly affected by the HRP conversion.
Mhm.
However, your team has been busy assisting others and advancing the sound engineering. What's new on that front?
Oh man. Well, first of all, we always look for an opportunity to get involved. We're kind of at the back of the pipeline, so if it's something that we could learn and do for somebody to get them closer to them finishing, so that we can get in there and have fun, we're all about it. That's the fun about being in an indie company. You can wear multiple hats and really get a good education of what works and doesn't work. So exciting stuff now.
This extra downtime seems to have significantly improved the spatial sound and acoustics within Eden Falling. Can you give us some details on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, we've added a technical sound design section, so we can do things that we couldn't do prior to that. For example, they've built us already two different tools. So we have a spatialization that we could do in-house as well as occlusion. We're using a third-party software, and we can't really control that. If something breaks down in their API and we can't use it, we're kind of stuck. This way, we're a little bit more control of our assets and our destiny. Basically, we can produce and not worry about what doesn't work.
That sounds very useful. I heard that Eden Falling has a jukebox system, and that sounds really fascinating. Can you tell players what to expect from this feature?
Oh yeah, no problem. Obviously you're going to be able to change music to what's more in your taste, so you could do that. But additionally, what we'll be doing is featuring different artists, and the goal is that this will give them access to a market that they may not have reached yet. So I mean, this is going to be pretty global, right? It's going to be on Steam. They'll just have more plays, and hopefully they could take off from there. And we were part of that history.
Well, that sounds like a really interesting feature, if I'm being honest. Now, I know, like said before, Sound Team hasn't been directly affected by the HRP conversion too much, but how has your team faced any challenges during the HDRP conversion?
Yeah, I mean, kinda. So as you said, we weren't really impacted. The problem with us was that it was a lot slower than expected. I think we all expected to be done much quicker. So the main issue for us is just access to the game while we're trying to do the HDRP, right? So like I said, we have a few great sound designers, tech sound designers, and they what they did was created a scene that we could go into and actually use our sounds. It's kind of a little Foley stage. We could use our sounds in context of of Unity, see if it works or not. We could even take some of the prefabs and go ahead and start putting them on those so that when HDRP is done, they're ready to go. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. It really didn't impact us. But like I said, very easy to implement after that. I don't know. When there's a will, there's a way, man. We're one team. We got to get it out.
Exactly. Well, Ray, thank you for your time today and for answering our questions, although you still have medical um, issues that you have to deal with.
Yeah, I appreciate. I mean, that's the cool part about working, indie. You do get to kind of be a lot more pioneering, and if you want to be on here at 2 in the morning, go for it. So it seems there's
Yeah,
always somebody
exactly.
on.
All right, well, thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, man. Likewise. Good to see you.
Good seeing you too.
Awesome. Well, now I would like to bring on our two assistant team leads from our VFX department, Zach Parsons and Jeffrey LaPera. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good, good.
Good. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Of course.
Well, okay, so let's just kick it off. Can you share some insights on the different lighting challenges when switching from URP to HDRP?
Oh man, I mean, there's a lot. One of the big things for global lighting that we had to face was we implemented an entirely new environmental lighting system. And so that took a while to get that all working, figure out what the settings were for that. On top of that, figuring out smaller lighting objects that we needed to update. Going from URP to HDRP just comes with a whole slew of issues of do we use this third-party software, and so making that and figuring out what we needed, what was included in HDRP inherently was a big challenge, and it took a while to figure out what looked good and what fit the style of the game. And on top of the fact that we were adding new people to the team that needed to understand how the game works, the lore behind the game, and just how it fit into the style of what we wanted the game to look like.
Awesome. Well, how did you navigate the process of like updating the old environment system to achieve the consistent lighting across all the scenes?
Yeah, so we essentially had to do like a lot of experimenting and had like, bring back the essence of the URP, but just, it's HDRP, so make it better. Since a lot of our team were, working on their own updates to the project, we did a lot of the testing and importing of their assets. So that caused just, like one extra step since our environment lighting package didn't like work consistently outside of the main project. But, once the team got comfortable in their understanding of the new requirements for the project and the engine, we moved more of them onto the repo and we speed up their workflow. It helped establish a rule of organizing our assets with constant whips with the team and always giving them feedback.
Awesome. Well, thank you for explaining that. I know I have a question for Zach. Could you just explain the overall importance of updating all the different holograms for the HDRP environment, and what specifically did that entail for your team?
Um, it entailed a lot. For us, it was a lot of what our team had talked about as well. Just materials, textures, shaders, all being deprecated. Some of them using old software that wasn't compatible with HDRP. And of course, that affects every single hologram, every single poster, all of those things that you see. So for us, it was a lot of just converting, whether it's converting it easily or entirely creating a new shader or material using shader graph. We learned a lot of how to use shader graph as our team brought up as well. That's been a huge part of doing our holograms. A bunch of our new guys are figuring out new ways to make things look better through shader graph. And yeah, just figuring out what the style looks like with holograms feeling like more actual advertisements being shown in the futuristic space, adding new, combination of new lore that's within the game on top of the Coca-Cola ads or what have you. So just figuring out what's the style looking like for holograms and advertisements in HDRP and how it fits into the lore of Eden Falling.
Yeah, I definitely give you guys all the credit in the world. I don't know if I'll have the patience for that. But Jeffrey, have there been any other hurdles that your team has ever had to overcome because of this conversion?
Yeah, so kind of additionally, it kind of works kind of a little hand in hand with the lighting we were talking about, but this like with the global lighting, a good amount of that was like the skybox and like especially the weather, since it's pretty like attached to like the lighting issues when we had to like update them. So, having to add our own like custom weather effects to like the package that we do for our like lighting, their global lighting. So, that I think that's complicated, but definitely it was interesting to tackle 'cause it just brings I don't know, brings the atmosphere in the world like more together like with our goals. Um, Top of that, I would say our map hologram was a huge feat that like at the same like I said before, it's kind of complicated, but it was very fun to tackle since there was a good amount of like shader graph uh, of that with the tools that we weren't too familiar with, but because there's new tools that we weren't used to before, it was definitely fun to tackle as it was, there was a good amount of back and forth with decision making, but the point was, for the best user experience at the end of the day.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and explaining all this to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
I would like to thank everyone who participated in this podcast with us. I would also like to thank our audience for being patient with us in our long 20 plus month journey to completing the HDRP conversion and then in our future going into early access.